welcome to the World Lens podcast, where we look at what's happening around the world each week through a global business lens. I'm your host, Michelle Evans, digital specialist at the World Trade Center Institute. And this week, we're going to be talking about a story that just keeps building. Every time I turn on the news, there's a new layer. Boeing. It's an American multinational corporation that designs and sells things like rockets and satellites and missiles, but they're probably most famous for designing airplanes, which is what we're going to be chatting about today. We've had this on our radar for a few months, but more and more incidents have happened in the recent months. So now it's an international concern. There are questions about safety of the Boeing aircraft, prominent reports of doors falling off mid-flight, re-inspections of jets, manufacturing line issues, whistleblowers. Bruce, what is going on with all these issues at Boeing?
Yeah, that'll be a good conversation. Let's start maybe stepping back, right?
Okay.
Because, whenever things like this pop up, people just feed on it, right? But we need to
Yeah.
step back and, our modern society has developed and relies on very complex systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, we're talking about a flying bus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a 737. A plane like that can have 600,000 parts. I think the
Mm-hmm.
747 has like 6 million parts, right?
Wow.
And you couple that complexity with, think about the people and technology that control the airspace
Mm-hmm.
that these flying buses are running around in. Well, in the United States, and I've looked at this data just to check, but 45,000 flights a day that are being managed in our
Yeah.
just our airspace, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
my background is as a systems engineer for NASA and the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a fundamental tenet around these systems, and that is complex systems are intrinsically or inherently hazardous systems.
Hmm.
Okay, because they can fail, and actually they're designed that they will fail, right? Because we have,
Right.
you know, like those doors, you might have two bolts in every corner, right? Just to have redundancy, right? Now, when none are put in, that's a problem, right? And
Absolutely.
anyway, so we see that across all the recent incidents, whether it's the front landing gear of that Boeing, I think it was FedEx aircraft that
Yeah.
the front gear wheel came off and it's skidding along, and all
The
of the
airstrip.
the thing is, none of these have been catastrophic failures, right?
You wouldn't
They've
call
been
those
failures
catastrophic?
that no, the plane didn't like crash and 300 people die, right? Like
I
the two
mean, I
Max flights.
understand that,
Right?
but at the
But I'm just
same
saying, yes,
time,
these systems will fail. They will fail, but in the vast majority of cases, they're not going to fail catastrophically where people are going to die. In fact, if you look at actual fatalities around commercial air, it's near zero for the last 2 decades.
okay.
Okay, so the point is, yes, this stuff happens, and but again, flying on commercial air is hugely safer than driving in your car. Whether you look
Yeah.
at any of those, any way that you want to look at it, right? You're but when it's right there and you see it on the news and everything, it's scary. It's like, oh my god, what's going on now? We can then talk about, yeah, that might be true, but what's the trend line, right? Is there something changing underneath where the past performance is no indication of future
Mm-hmm.
outcome? And that's what we'll talk about today, is that yes, there are issues that are intrinsically increasing these issues that have to be addressed.
And they're not really isolated to one type of plane that Boeing makes, is it?
No, no. Last year we had uh, aircraft issues with Boeing, Airbus, Embraer, even Cessna. So no, it's
Mm.
these are again complex systems. They're going to fail, and all systems, no matter who's manufacturing them, are going to have issues. Just right now, Boeing is front and center, and
You're in the hot
unfortunately
seat.
for them, they're not performing well, and they deserve the attention they're getting.
So you basically said that like these things were almost like going bound to happen, just with the nature of building airplanes. But you said Boeing, like right now, they're right in the news, like always in the news right now. Why are we
Mhm.
seeing all these issues from them right now? Was there a change that they made in their management or leadership, or something that they changed with making the
Yes.
planes?
So that's where we are. So when you have a failure, we talk at root cause analysis, like what caused that failure, right? Was
Right.
it material that fatigued and broke, or was it human error, or what? And what we're seeing around a number of these incidents now are not safety issues, they're quality control issues.
Mm,
And that's what's driving this like intense focus on Boeing, because absolutely Boeing has gone from being this, and when I worked with them in the late 80s and 90s, and
mm-hmm,
building space flight systems and those kinds of things, we're intensely an engineering focused. They controlled the whole process end to end. They were relentless in quality. That was Boeing, right? In
mm-hmm,
1997, they merged with McDonnell Douglas, right? The MD-80s and all that, right? So
mm-hmm,
so that, and what happened was is that merger, and they relocated the headquarters to Chicago, and then the board and management became more focused on marketing and financial performance than they were this like relentless engineering organization. And I would say that was the inflection point that got us here today. and
I
uh,
can
and
see
so
why.
and the other company that you hear about, and this is indicative of what happened, is the Spirit Arrow, right? It
Yes.
is always comes up in these, and I'm sure people are like, "Well, Spirit Arrow, what's that got to do with anything?" Right? Again, it was this whole kind of like financial performance engineering of making Boeing leaner, and they ended up taking this essentially subsidiary that built these airframes, and they sold it off, right?
Mm,
And to basically get more value from that asset than holding it internally, right? So now you have two different companies trying to build a very complex system, and in time that becomes difficult, right? So it's
yeah.
it's like these layers of cutting and trying to optimize supply chain and trying to cut costs and produce more profitability. I is what I personally feel like those cultural and manufacturing changes have led to not only the current issues, but the whole max, and ultimately the 787 Dreamliner challenges that are also out there. So this is now not so much that here we have a complex system and it is going to fail. Now we have complex systems that are being built with quality challenges underneath that are inducing issues that are going to create failures. And when you have, a one-off failure may not create a catastrophe, but if you have
But
multiple
several.
or cascading failures, then we have catastrophes like we had with the
Yeah.
Max.
So what does this mean for the wider aircraft market? The only other one I know of is like Airbus, and
Airbus,
it's a
right?
Netherlands company. Does this
Well,
mean
yeah,
that other
Netherlands I think might be the financial, but Toulouse is where they build them. But go
ah
in France. But go ahead. Yeah.
but yeah, like what does this mean that other commercial plane or commercial airlines are going to start using Airbus as opposed to Boeing?
I can imagine every air carrier wishes they could snap their fingers and switch. That is so. A number of big carriers have diversity in supply, right? Where they have Airbus and Boeing for risk management, right? But even with
Mhm.
that, ramping up. planes of one type or another does not happen overnight. This is a multi-year process of placing orders and getting in the manufacturing queue and getting it produced, and it's a long process. So very difficult to like ramp up and say I'm going to switch from Boeing to Airbus because there's
If
just not
only.
enough production capacity, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if the planes are being perceived as unsafe, I know you fly a lot. You were flying earlier. Is
Right.
this something that like you will check now with your travel? Does it make you nervous in any kind of way, like looking to see what type of aircraft you're going to be flying on?
I mean, let's see, I was on 727 and a 737 Max this week,
Mm.
right? So no,
Felt
again,
safe?
it comes back to my opening remark. Air travel is the safest way for people to move on this planet is
Mm-hmm.
on aircraft, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I don't question that at all, right? Um, you know, there are issues. There were issues. I mean, when we had the two Max accidents,
Mm-hmm.
catastrophic accidents, that put intense scrutiny on that airframe and the technology that was in there and all the control systems and everything. I feel like that plane, has had so much scrutiny, right? That it's, definitely better than it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we also know the FAA has been underfunded, right, by the government,
Yeah.
and so the hens watching the fox watching the hen house, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
they rely on the manufacturers for a lot of the expertise and that kind of thing. So that's an area that needs to be changed, but it requires funding, and in the U.S. that's also problematic, right? But I
Yeah.
have no concerns, and it's interesting because people are saying, well, oh, I see they put the equipment type now when you book online, right? And it's like, no, that's been there for
I was gonna
years
say it's
and
always
years.
been there.
Now
You're
you're
probably
looking
just
at it.
paying more attention to it.
Right.
Yeah, because before I would see that and I'm like, oh, it's a plane.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter what type of plane it is as long as it's going to get me from point A to
Which
B.
it does, right?
But
Exactly.
what's the long-term effect of like this change in perception that Boeing is no longer safe? Like I saw that it was listed that Boeing's market cap was 130 billion. Does that valuation start to fall or is it just like a blip?
So yeah, so that was mentioned in your notes, and I said, no, I think that might be a little. So I actually looked today; it's 111 billion. So,
Ah. Oh, it's a
so
couple billion
yeah,
off.
yeah. But anyway, um, so Boeing, since especially they had the lithium battery issues and stuff, but it's definitely
Mhm.
since the Max accidents has been in financial stress.
I can imagine.
And I would say at this point, when you look at their net profit, which has been negative 2 to 4 billion for the last, I don't know, 4 years or more. So they're from a net basis, they're not making money.
Right.
Their share price went from 330 or 340 at the beginning of 2021 to 180 today. If you don't
Mm.
consider that to be financial distress, and so to me, that throws another red flag from a governance and oversight for especially the
Mhm.
FAA to say, here you have a company that's in financial stress who's been trying to cut corners to increase profitability, but they've created problems that is decreasing profitability.
Right.
What needs to happen? And no competitor is going to like pop up and say, "Oh, we're now building
Pick
airplanes.
me.
Trust us." Right? It's just, it would take huge amount of capital and many years to build any credibility to enter the market. And right now, I think Boeing has like 42% of the market, and I think from an
Mm.
order perspective, Airbus has like 60 some percent of the orders. So you can see where they're already losing that
Yeah.
market share in time as those are delivered. So what could happen? I feel like where we are right now is there could be somebody that kind of swoops in and says,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to take over Boeing and we're going to completely restructure it and rebuild its reputation, right? And
So it
we're
would no
going to,
longer be a public company.
it still could be a public company, but just with a whole new, it could be taken private, given where the valuation is right now. I guess
Yeah.
that's, but anyway, but to me, I feel like at this point, something dramatic has to happen, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know yet. I mean, I don't know how many CEOs they've had since the Max accidents, probably at least two. I don't know. But anyway,
Oh,
bringing in a
jeez.
new CEO, I don't think is going to be the answer, right? And now you
Mm-hmm.
have, um, I don't know how many whistleblowers now, that are kind of coming out of
I
the
think there might
dark,
be like
and
10.
yeah. So yeah, so I'm envisioning there will be some either government forced issue or market forced issue that says, okay, we have to have like an inflection point to change the dynamics. Now, the other thing that's happening in parallel, of course, is technology's moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about fuel, so like hydrogen and other fuels. We're talking about material science that's evolving, production like 3D printing and all different kinds of manufacturing processes and robotics, and
Mm-hmm.
so there are a lot of things. The whole kind of vertical takeoff and landing VTOL, right? That whole kind of what I'll call kind of uh, intercity, so regional hubs where you can take these VTOLs from small communities and then bring them into a large hub that would go on these larger aircraft. All of that's evolving. So that those market dynamics where you may see, new engines and new
Mm-hmm.
fuselage technology and new manufacturing technology that in reasonable time, not a year or two, but 5 and 10, we will see major dynamic and new competitors coming in that actually can
Mm-hmm.
start with 2% of the market, 5%, and start chipping away at this dupology, or no,
Tongue twister.
two players, whatever it is. Anyway, so that's I guess what I see, but there's
Yeah.
something's going to happen here, either in short order or definitely in the longer time frame.
So I want to kind of switch for a sec,
Uh-huh.
because in the news, of course, like probably yesterday, day before, um, there was they were talking about the Starliner spacecraft that
Oh,
Boeing
sure, yeah.
is a part of.
Mhm. Boeing, yeah.
Would
Actually, just the capsule.
Yes.
Mhm.
Would you feel safe getting on a Boeing built spacecraft?
Oh, 1000%.
Yeah.
Yeah, the space market and building spacecraft are completely different than this high volume producing thousands of planes.
There's got to be more
Dozens of planes
regulations
a month.
around it too.
It's a very intense and scrutinized and multiple players that are no, having been in the space flight market and
Hmm.
built space flight instrumentation and worked on space programs. No, I would 100%.
So is timing and I guess quantity affecting the same level of quality for airplanes that they put in with that cap on the spacecraft?
Well, it's for this craft, you might build one or two or a handful. Like now, you know we have SpaceX and others that are more in a production mode, but we're not building dozens per month, right? Where you have this
Hmm.
like massive kind of high volume production, and these systems have lots of sensors, lots of scrutiny down to chip quality, the all from done in clean rooms, and just there's so much that goes on to ensure the quality of that product. And matter
And
of fact,
there's
I
no way
think
to
it
do
was
that with the
scuttled. The
airplanes.
launch was delayed because I think they had a valve issue or something. Typical,
Yeah.
when you have fuel systems. I don't know how
Hmm.
many times the shuttle was shut down for valve issues. And as soon as if there's anything that crosses that line, they'll scrub it, and they'll go dig into it, check it out, replace it, retest it. get it back. It's a whole different. If a sensor goes off on an airplane at 30,000 feet, if it's not a big deal, when they land, they'll
Mm-hmm.
put it in the mechanic log to have them look at it, right? So the whole different, you know, world. No air versus air.
But okay, before we leave today, I want to
Sure.
discuss the whistleblowers. Two who came out publicly have since passed. And their lawyers are saying that there are like at least 10 more out there. What does this
Sure.
suggest for Boeing? Because I saw a news story that was saying that the number of complaints from Boeing's employees since then has gone up 500%.
Okay.
And I mean, I feel like that's saying a lot about their safety and trust in their employees and their company.
Hmm.
Why do you think that this is happening right now? Do you think that a change of leadership would change, or like you suggested, like just someone coming in and stripping
So
it clean and starting
this
over?
is why I would say I think there's something that dramatic needs to happen,
Mhm.
because this cultural shift has happened, evolved since 1997,
Mm.
right? And then you've had this cultural shift, and then you've had the underlying systems and how people view their work, and the challenges they have under the demands of. A matter of fact, I think the FAA like pushed back and put a limitation on the number of planes that they were allowed to produce per month, right?
Mhm.
To try to get quality up. So yeah, I think there are probably thousands of very unhappy Boeing employees that know that things could and should be better, right? And so it
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me that we have a chorus of people that are closest to it that are saying enough already, right? And
Yeah.
that's why I feel this will be a catalyst for something big to happen to Boeing, to rebuild credibility with not only the market but more importantly the people that are buying, which is a big issue, and we should talk about
Yeah.
that. But also the passengers that are getting on these aircraft that are concerned.
This is such a big story. So many
Mhm.
layers. I'm actually flying next week and it looks like I'll be on a Boeing 737 Max.
There you
So
go. That's what I flew last night. I was more
fingers
worried about the
crossed.
weather, but yeah.
Oh, well, Breeze, thanks so much for joining me today. And of course, thank you so much for tuning in. Please visit the World Trade Center Institute online at WTCI.org for more insights, events, and opportunities. And make sure to follow us on all social channels at WTC Institute. See you all next week.